let's set the scene. 6 chairs round a table outside the teak greenhouse on a terrace. And I walked past one day and I suddenly thought, this could do with a bit of a cheer up. So I went onto the plant sales area and I had a look and I found there's some lovely little cyclamen there. There was something else from a plant from Australia, Ciliatus, and they look as if they've got soft pink bottle brush heads on them. And of course, they're not soft pink at all. They're quite hard and stiff to the touch. The copper bowl is that lovely verdigris green that goes with anything. I have found an old rusty crown that I had from flower arranging days, fluffed it up a bit, gave it a jolly good watering, and there it's been since the beginning of September.
Hello and welcome to a Talking Dirty special all about the absolutely awesome Oktober plants at East Ruston Old Vicarage. Over at aforementioned garden on the East Norfolk coast, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful warm welcome. And over in Cambridgeshire, on what started out to be an absolutely wonderful autumnal day, it's clouded over slightly now, but bringing the sunshine back into the programme for you and I, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson.
If you're thinking she looks a bit ropey today, I've been to baby swimming and there's like nothing that is going to make you look a little under par. It's nothing quite like dipping yourself in chlorine and being splashed by a toddler. So that's my excuse anyway, and I'm sticking with it.
If most people look like you when they've been baby swimming, they'd be more than happy.
Thank you. You can come again. You're going to move on to the little co-star. If you're watching the video version, there's a leaf or two just peeping into the side of Alan's shot, which we will come on to later. But we're going to move on to fabulous autumn foliage. But we're going to start with some fabulous special flowers, which have been wowing you at East Ruston. Of course, we all know when we visit your garden, it's a plantsman's paradise. And there are just all of these little treats tucked into every corner. Everywhere you walk, there's something unusual. And certainly one plant you don't see everywhere is a Lapageria. And you sent me a glorious photo of one that you're enjoying at the moment.
Yes, I have persevered with this. I have to say, it's not the most easy plant to please. It's the national flower of Chile, where it grows in forest conditions that are always moist, never wet. Work that one out for yourselves, I tell you. But this is what I'm told. In almost sort of level temperatures, and the temperatures is, well, we have a word for it in England. It's called cool, COOLTH. So that's what it enjoys, and it's very difficult in our country trying to replicate that climate for it. But we persevere. I've only got 2 flowers this year, I'm afraid, but you know it's a very welcome sight. Here we are, nearly in the middle of October. We're past the middle of October, and we have things to look at like that lovely rose pink Lapageria.
And you have the rose pink one, of course. This is a plant, if you go to, is it Chatsworth?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you're lucky enough to see the many shades from white to blushing pink and then the darker pink as well.
And yes, and there's a red one there as well, I believe. But I mean, I don't know quite how they managed to produce. I mean, they are so beautiful. Matt Pottage, who used to be the curator at Wisley, he has one growing in his semi-basement area, which is his garden in London, where, of course, it does get shelter and it does get shade, and it performs beautifully. But he rightly says they are caviar to marauding mollusks. So slugs and snails, you know, you've got to do your utmost to keep them away because they just munch away at them. So, yeah, I mean, they do take a little bit of looking after, not just climatically, but, you know, you've got to keep the munchies away from them.
Those of us with smaller gardens, we're quite used to going out and doing marauding mollusk maraud under cover of darkness with our flashlights and our buckets or whatever our method is. But you've got a huge amount of space. Do you have specific plants that you'll do that with, or are you reliant on your soot or your eggshells or whatever you go for to kind of prevent them getting to those special plants?
Well, to be quite honest, I don't do that much. If I want to protect something special, I use soot. Because we've just had the chimney swept ready for the winter, and we had the chimney swept at the end of the winter as well. And so we do our chimneys twice a year. And I always save the soot. I mean, I think the chimney sweep thinks I'm completely mad because I said, don't you dare take that soot away. There's no Granny Gray trick, you know, this is what you do. But then you have to replace the soot every time there's been rain because it gets washed into the soil. Most of my fires are wood fires anyway, so I mean, you know, that means it really it's potash soot, not posh soot, potash soot.
Well, it comes from your fire, so it is posh as well.
Yeah, well, of course. And anyway, yeah. So, and I use that. I have used those sort of wool pellets that you can buy, which I think they're more of a deterrent than anything else. But I mean, you know, if it's something very precious, then I will use soot, and I do save soot, especially for, you know, special plants. In actual fact, my soot has its own dustbin.
I can just imagine it, having been in the potting shed, having been behind the scenes at East Ruston Old Vicarage quite a lot. Things do get labelled up. It doesn't mean they don't go walkabouts or get nicked, but things do tend to be labelled, and we all know what will happen if you're caught red-handed with certain people's tools. Anyway, talking of unusual flowers, which I wish I'd seen in real life. Obviously, as ever, I haven't had a chance to come and walk around your garden, being a bit too far away at the moment. The red passion flower we have mentioned, the one you got from Krieg,
Yeah.
that is such a stop you in your tracks kind of flower.
Well, it is what I hoped it would be, because the one I'd actually wanted, which I can't remember the name of, the one we're looking at is Passiflora semiciliosa. And that was recommended to me by Sue Wynne Jones because she didn't have the one I really wanted. And I said, "Are you sure it's red?" Yes, she said, "It is red." And I thought, I bet it's going to be a horrible winey red. And it's not. It's the most brilliant scarlet, but it is a proper red without any hint of orange in it. And it is a lovely thing. And I mean, mine is only, it's in its first year. It came as in a 4-litre deep pot, so you know it was a sizable plant. And I think I paid £25 for it. She's now selling them at £35 because it's a year on since, you know, and they've grown. And they've had to be looked after. And I mean, they are wonderful, wonderful things. Somebody said to me in the garden the other day, "You know that it needs a minimum of 60 degrees." And I said, "Well, what do you think? I live in an igloo?" Because it's in my orangery, you see. So, I mean, it's going to be, I mean, I don't know whether it's going to be 60 degrees every day, but you know, 60 degrees is quite a low temperature to be living in. I think most people's homes are probably 65 to 70 degrees. So I hope it's going to come through the winter. I think it probably will. But it's one of those plants that flowers intermittently. If I say intermittently, I don't mean it covers itself with flowers, but it'll have 2 open every day. They only last a day. There'll be 2 followed by 2. And if you're lucky, you might get 4 one of these days. But I mean, I've just had them in 2. So there's 2, 2, 2, 2. And that's it. It's lovely. I
And
absolutely adore it.
this plant, I think, illustrates perhaps more than anything else the level of house plantage that Alan Gray can serve up in his orangery compared to most of us. You do take house plants to an entire new level.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think I grow lots of ordinary things that people like. I mean, I grow Bougainvillea. A lot of people have that.
I know, but
I
still,
grow,
like next level kind of display, like a center of a table cascade of Bougainvillea.
yeah, well, I mean, I do a bit of that. I was just debating. I have Mandevillas, pink Mandevillas. I have the red one, which I'm quite satisfied with, but the red's rather loud for me, that particular red. And I love the mandevillas with their pink or even white flowers. White, yeah, I've got mandevillas with white flowers, not that particular one, but pink mandevilla flowers I love. And I've got one. I'm wondering whether I dare try and chance it outside throughout the winter in a very, very sheltered place. I probably, if I do that, I'll probably lose it. But I mean, you know, you've got to experiment. Now, as I have more than one, why don't I just do that?
Yeah. Well, talking of things which I don't think you do chance outside, but certain, people I follow on Instagram who live down in, say, Mousehole. If you don't follow My Garden on the Edge, just one of the most wonderful Instagrams. And I was actually lucky enough to meet Dom at the Chelsea Flower Show this year and just love his page even more, having met him. What a wonderful man. He, I think, lost his Tibouchina in a big gale that came in, because of course you get mild weather, but you
Yeah,
also get everything that the sea has to throw at you, and all those storms that come
yeah,
just straight in on the southwest. And so he lost it. I think it kind of just got knocked straight down, but
I think yes, it was away.
formerly had been outside. Your Tibouchina, I believe, comes in, but is still, I mean, I remember from previous years seeing a big potted specimen round by where people have their lunches outside your tea room, and it is just a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. It really is.
Well, it's a stunning plant. I mean, Tibouchina urvilleana, it starts flowering in about July. It's not an early starter, but it goes on and on and on. So if you've got it in a pot outside that you can bring into your conservatory or garden room or whatever, it will carry on flowering until February. But beware, it's a bit like Bougainvillea. If you're a tidy-minded person, it will annoy you because its petals shatter and they fall to the floor. And it does this every day. And the outer casing then falls off and that drops to the floor. So, I mean, you mustn't be too house proud if you do this, but it is a lovely, lovely plant. And I don't know. I mean, my garden on the edge, if they can do it down there, and I mean, I know they have virtually no frost at all. We do have frost, but I mean, I just sort of think, you see, I'm rethinking. Graham and I made a pact that we wouldn't wrap any plants ever again in about 2008 or 9, just before that really last hard winter. And we didn't, and we haven't. And, you know, some plants may die. I accept that. You have to be philosophical about it. If they die, they die. A bit like Joan Collins and her young husband. You know, if he dies, he dies. But there are some plants. The more I push the boundaries, the more I feel that they deserve to be probably wrapped. Maybe only when they're young. But if it's something that, if it's a plant, I mean, you know, they say size matters, Thordis. Well, it does when it comes to wrapping plants, let me tell you, because the bigger they are, the more difficult it is. So when you've got something that's, you know, small and manageable, well, why not give it a go? Wrap it up and just, you know, try and get it through, because plants, as they age, as they go through one cold winter after another, after another, after another, I think that they build up a kind of resistance to the frost. And there's also that thing of the bark, you know, the bark on a shrub, it becomes thicker and more frost resistant, even if the tips get burnt. But, you know, let's see. It's easy for me because I'm a compulsive propagator. I can't help. I mean, I'm going around, I've got a list of plants that I've got to propagate, and I walk past something else and I think, oh, I could do some cuttings off that. I mean, I've got a lovely Abutilon called Fool's Gold, which has got very flared golden flowers with a sort of crinkly edge to them. And I just thought, well, you know, shall I take, it's a young plant. I looked at it yesterday and I thought I could get 4 cuttings off that. Will I spoil the shape of it? Oh, well, you might. I don't know. But if I don't, I won't have one to try outside. I've only got one plant, and that was very kindly bought for me by Lionel, who said to me, I've located a source of, we both been after this plant. And he'd located somebody that had got some for sale. And he said to me, would you like me to get one for you? So he did. And so, you know, it's, and I've looked everywhere else for another one so that I can, you know, my philosophy, never buy one of anything, buy at least 2. One to enjoy, the other to chop up. Because that's, you know, that's how I make them more impressive.
Yeah, I'm trying very hard to not, because obviously, you know, we all know I've got various asks on my time at the moment, demands, which leave me less time to look after plants. But I cannot resist. If someone actually is going to thrust something into my hand, and we did the radio the other week, and I got handed a cutting of Plectranthus, which I have got, you know, obviously happily rooted on my windowsill in water, and I've got to deal with at some point. But it's growing so much that all I keep thinking is there are loads of cuttings there. Just all I want to do is create, you know, 5 more, and then I'll have 6 of them to look after, which is not compatible with my life right now. So got to try and learn self-restraint, which we all know is not something I'm kind of.
The other thing, when you're doing cuttings the way you are, you really should be doing them not now as we're going into the winter. I know this was a gift that you were given and that's why you're doing it, but just try and keep that one plant growing on your windowsill until you can no longer see out the kitchen window, and then take cuttings in about March where the weather's starting to warm up, because you can sort of root them and then gradually sort of force them on outside into the big wide world, as it were.
Much better idea. So yeah, it's I'm just gonna have to cut it back and get rid of the material, because we were already now not, it's big. It's just a big plant, big cutting. But I just need to learn to say no. It's a work in progress. We've touched on flowers at East Ruston Old Vicarage, though obviously at this time of year it's so exciting with foliage, and as you know, alongside all of the normal things that float our boat at this time of year, you have a number of lovely, interesting things, including this spectacular foliage plant I don't think we've ever spoken about on Talking Dirty. I don't know why, but I mean, it's certainly a plant that speaks to me.
Yeah, it's Iresine Brilliantissimum, and I saw this growing in a church garden in Chelsea in London. Graham and I had just been to the Chelsea Flower Show, and we were walking back, and I saw this from a distance, and I said, what on earth is that? And we had to go up and have a look at it. And I had tried to grow this plant, but I planted it in sun. It doesn't like sun. It's a very soft foliage plant. It won't take any frost at all. It just goes to mush, the first frost that we have. But it just gets better and better and better as the nights become longer. I don't know whether it's a day length sensitive plant or not, but it just gets better and better and better until suddenly one day there's a frost and bang, it's gone. So you've got to take cuttings if you want to keep it going from year to year. I never have enough of it. The one thing I noticed when it was growing in the church garden, so much better than mine, it was in perpetual shade. And I thought, that's what it likes. And so I have a little clump outside my office window where I'm sitting now in complete shade, doesn't get any sun at all, and it is just brilliant. And when visitors come to the garden at this time of the year, they are compelled to come and have a look and see what it is.
And for people who don't know it, just describe that patterning, that colouring.
Well, I suppose you call it cerise, cherry red, and it's got paler veining in the leaves. The stems are a brilliant magenta cerise. I mean, it's all those sort of hot, dark pink colours, really, that merge together to make a kind of red, I suppose. Most people would say it's red, but if you look closely, you'll see the difference. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's got large foliage. It's very brittle. The foliage is quite brittle. If you knock a leaf, you'll break it. I don't see it flower at all. I haven't seen any flowers on it at all. It's just this wonderful. It must have flowers on it, and probably in the tropics where it grows, it does.
Yeah, the brittleness of it might mean it wouldn't be good in a container, but it really looked, just from a glance at the photo, like I can imagine that in a shady container planting, really, with some certain things as a foil. I can't think of what, but with certain plants as a foil, that could be a really stunning specimen.
Well, I've got it marked for my front door next year.
I thought you might. If it would work.
There's also a yellow leaf form of it, which has yellow and green veins. That is a bit hectic, and unless you're a great supporter of Norwich City Football Club, yellow and green are their colours. Maybe I should do a pot for them to have outside their dressing room door or something.
Wouldn't work in this house. I have an Ipswich Town supporter in this house, so that plant would not go down well. It kind of, when I first glanced at it, and having not seen it in person, this might be completely incorrect, but it had a bit of a Strobilanthes air to it. You grow that, you grow that amazing Strobilanthes.
Yeah, a Persian shield, yes. I can see why you think the similarities there. I don't think there's any relation between them, but yes, I can quite see where you're coming from with that.
I just love those plants that will do well in shade and bring that punch and that colour. Containers like you do by your north door, your north facing front door, are so rare. We stopped somewhere. I think it was Stratford. We were on holiday and we stopped for a walk around, stretched the legs of toddler and dog, and walked past a very smart house, quite central to Stratford. So you can imagine quite smart and historic. And they had done such Alan Gray style planters either side of their front door, big things with lovely, unusual Plectranthus, like that really kind of gold Plectranthus, a name I can't remember. All these lovely things, and the house plant, the Maiden's blush type thing that you, Tradescantia type things that you grow. And you realise how rare that kind of planting is when you're walking along and you suddenly stop. And I took photos. I wished I could have told them how blown away I was by it. Start carrying a notebook specifically so I can put notes through people's letterboxes saying, I haven't seen you to compliment you on this planting, but it has made my day. Just know what an impact you're having on passers-by. But there should be more. I should do more of this, just more fantastic shade container planting, because it can be amazing.
I've got another one for you. This is a species, Streptocarpus. We've been growing it for years, and we grow it in shady areas of the garden. It's not hardy, but I mean, it strikes very readily from cuttings. So you can have 12 without really thinking about it. It's called Streptocarpus saxorum, and it is the most amazing blue. And it has these little dancing, they're like little blue butterflies floating above the foliage.
I feel like probably we've made people wait long enough, seeing as we're talking about foliage, for your little co-conspirator peeping into the side of your video screen. This, I think, is a new acquisition of yours.
Well, it is, because yesterday I said to Graham, I need to go out and get something from a nursery. I said, are you coming? So he came with me, And I said, shall we just look at the plants while we're here? Well, of course, that's fatal, isn't it? Because they had in this nursery three particular plants of, well, not just three, but three varieties of a camellia, a variety called Sasanqua. And Camellia sasanquas, they flower early. They flower in the autumn, and they will go through, if the buds get frosted in the winter, there's a succession of flowers. So the new ones will open when the weather warms again. And they had a white one, a pink one, and a red one. And I thought, which one shall I have? Nah, come on, have one of each. Don't be mean. And now on the way home, I was thinking to myself, well, these would make ideal contenders for the north front door. Why didn't I buy a pair? But anyway, I didn't. And whilst we were there, we were looking at all the other things that you see. And my eyes were glued to this, or taken to this fantastic Berberis. Can you see that? I mean, look at the red colouring on that. I mean, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just that attracted me. I went back, I picked it up and I took it and put it in the trolley. And then I thought, well, I don't know, have I got the best one? You know what us people are like. We always want the best one. And why not, shouldn't we have? It's our money, hard-earned money that's going to go. Well, I just picked this pot up again because I must just show you. If you look at the base of that pot, you will see in the base of that pot, there's lots of seedlings, and they too are changing colour. And I can't resist a bargain. And Ian says to me, oh, look, old Del Boy Gray, he's been at it again. So I've got about 10 little seedlings in the bottom there. So I've got to I should pot those individually and keep them somewhere sheltered over the winter, and we'll have a forest of them next year. But then does it mean that this plant, this Berberis that I so enjoy for its autumn colour, it has pale primrose coloured flowers in early summer, followed by bluish green berries. So it's quite attractive in fruit as well. But does it mean that it's going to be an incontinent self-seeder?
I hope so.
Not.
Well, I hope not. I hope so, because then, first of all, Del Boy Gray can. Well, I suppose maybe you feel a bit bad about passing it on and selling it to people if it's going to be a menace. But I don't know. It looks like a plant you'd be happy to have many of.
Well, yeah, there was about 10 of these in this particular stand, and this was the only one that had seedlings in it. So
not too bad then. Not too much of a menace.
No,
what was it again? What was its full name?
Oh, I haven't told you, have I? But I have to read it because it's Berberis gagnepanii. I've never heard of it.
Wow.
Gagnepanii. I looked it up on the internet when I got back. It's got a sort of a name at the end called fern spray, and I suppose because it's got quite ferny foliage. But it is the kind of plant that you can use to keep out intruders because it's very sharp and very spiny.
I was just looking, even on the video, I can see some good old Berberis spines on that.
Yep. It's the kind of plant that you don't want to get too close to. So if you've got a marauding badger coming through I would put it in that right in front of the hole where the badger gets in. Maybe it will deter them. Maybe it won't. Who knows?
I will show my untrained eye by admitting that when I first saw the photo of it, I was like, oh, there's a lovely Acer. And he said, there isn't. It's not an Acer. And that's what I thought it was, which if you're watching, if you're listening to this, gives you an idea of the dissection of the foliage, I suppose, that at a glance, and the colouring of that bright red. Thank you. Very kind. Make me seem less foolish. You have obviously got a multitude of glorious Acers at East Ruston, though.
Yes, we have. We've got lots and lots of Acers. Some colour wonderfully well, others don't. We bought specifically many years ago Acers that were recommended for their autumn colour to plant in our woodland area, and we had it. The idea of the woodland going out in a blaze of glory. Well, I don't think there's probably one or two that colour. The rest just don't do it. I don't know why. It may be the fact that we don't have enough coal to make them really, really colour up. And I think that's probably what it is. I can't think what else it is, because the soil is neutral. They like an acid soil anyway, and the soil is neutral. So they're getting enough acidity there. But there we are. That's the way it is. So lots of those Acers, now that they've grown to be 12 feet tall, they're making way for other plants. And I do think it's advisable, if you can, from my experience anyway, to buy a plant when you can see it's showing its true colours, like the Berberis I've got here. And similarly with Acers, sometimes in a pot they will colour more extraordinarily because the roots are being constrained. But the other one that I think, an Acer that I would recommend for autumn colour, is one called Oktober Glory, and it's Oktober. So I think that's German spelling. I think I'm not sure, but somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. But even so, in this garden, it should be November cheer because it doesn't ever colour until November. So there we are.
Yeah.
Everything varies, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's all very garden specific. Going back to flowers and extraordinary flowers in your garden, I am so sad that I'm missing out on all of the salvias because just every year you
Yeah.
seem to gain more sort of spectacular salvia fireworks.
Well, yes. I mean, we do have a lot of salvias, and I mean the ones that I really persevere with are the ones that are hardy in this garden. And the one that I particularly like called Salvia involucrata Bartholii. Bartholii has these enormous fat pink buds, and then the tubular flowers come out of the pink buds, and it's a great, great, great plant. Doesn't start flowering until probably September, but then it just goes on and on and on until it's stopped by the weather. And the day length, of course, because I mean, we getting shorter and shorter days. Um, but it's just such a wonderful plant. And from the base to the top, it can be 2 meters, and it can be a meter and a half wide. I should say 1.5 meters, because you don't put halves and 0.5s, do you, in the same sentence? It's silly. Anyway, the things about these big salvias is that if you have a lot of wind, they can get severely damaged. But the great thing about them is they are great for recovering from those wind damages, because every side shoot at this time of the year has got a flower bud in it. So you may miss a little bit of colour for a little while, but soon they're back on song and they're flowering away again. And so I've been taking lots of cuttings of those. I suddenly found I hadn't got Salvia leucantha as one that I don't know why I didn't do it. It's known as the chenille sage. It's got very fluffy flowers, and they're sort of like purple and white. But this texture of chenille. Do you remember? You won't remember chenille tablecloths years ago when Granny, used to put a posh cloth on the table, and the cloth was put on the table so that you didn't damage the tablecloth, the table surface when you were doing handicrafts, because in the days before electric light, the lamp would be lit and put in the middle of the table, and everybody sat around the table doing whatever they were doing, whether they were making something out of matches or, whittling a piece of wood or doing some embroidery or whatever they were doing. And yeah, this, goodness me, I don't know what I'm talking about that for.
Well, this podcast is all about tangents. That was a brilliant one. I was right there. What beautiful pictures painted by darkness.
Well, there used to be a conversation that went something like this. Do you think it's time to light the lamp? No, we'll give it another 5 minutes. And the reason for that comment was that, it was saving a little bit extra money, burning less paraffin or oil or whatever you put in your lamps and everything else.
I'm sure you brought back loads of memories for people. A bit like we very recently did an Apple Day on the show, and the garden party on the radio, Sundays 11 till 1, BBC Radio Norfolk, Suffolk and Cambridgeshire, if you want to come along and join us and ask questions. So that wasn't really necessarily apple focused. Everything else on the show, the surrounding hours, was from the East of England Apple and Orchard Project, telling us about the kind of history and origins of the apple, to tasting apples and talking about apple baskets and all these things. That we got stuck into some of these topics as part of the garden party. And just hearing people's varieties that they remembered, Dr. Harvey's in Norfolk, things like that, varieties that they tasted and remembered from their youth, that actually often you can still get hold of today from the East of England Apples and Orchards Project. It was really lovely. And apple baskets, and your wonderful historic apple baskets that you have at East Ruston Old Vicarage, all these lovely things. It's nice to have these little tangents and bring back all these memories.
Well, it's all part of our history, isn't it? So I mean, then it's not what you call life-changing history, but it's the history of the domestic history of how people lived and what they did, and the tools that they used and everything else. That's why we started collecting old garden tools, because they're part of our gardening history, and they are not made to the same degree of craftsmanship today as they were, although there are one or two people trying.
Yeah, do go along to East Ruston if you are there, and you admittedly don't really have enough time to even take in all of the plants during the opening hours, but try and carve out a little bit of time, maybe when you stop the cake, to enjoy all of the the tools as well.
It's very interesting because you say that, I mean, because the amount of people that I see, they come in for tea and then out comes the phone and they're going around videoing all the tools. It's quite fascinating.
It's very kind of you that you allow people to do two things at once. They can eat cake and still feel like they're taking on board the whole East Ruston experience by looking at the tools in the tea room, and also the extraordinary decor of the tea room, which continues the
Yeah.
colourful thing. Back to the plants. Salvias, tubular flowers. We all know I love those. We all know I love cufeas. And one of the little photos you pinged over to me was one of your cufeas looking absolutely marvelous. We all need. I just need more cufeas in the world. I was actually in a National Trust garden the other day where they had a lovely repeat planting of cufeas and a tiny little flowered fuchsia, and it was wonderful. It just, I want that in my life. It was great. Not the sort of thing you necessarily always see in a National Trust garden. This place obviously really loved its garden and its
I know you
gardeners.
sent me pictures,
Yeah.
and I couldn't believe that, here we have somebody in a National Trust garden who's actually cares about the plants, and they're growing very interesting things. And incidentally, I went the other day to Felbrigg Hall in Norfolk, which is just the other side of Cromer, and Tina, the head gardener there, I saw her in the garden here earlier this year, and I went and paid her a visit. And I mean, I was just blown away. This garden has gone through many stages. Basically, the garden's about a 4-acre walled garden there, but the planting was absolutely superb. I mean, it's congratulations to Tina and her team because, and the variety of plants, that's what, I mean, if I go to a garden and I've seen everything, I'm not that interested in it, however beautifully it's arranged. I do like to see plants that I don't know when I don't know what they are. And here we had several plants that I didn't know what they were. There was a lovely orange flowered salvia. I'd love to get my teeth into some cuttings of that. So I may be back to ask Tina for a few cuttings, I think. But, and what else did I see? Oh, okay. Too many things.
I must
Too
say,
many things.
I visit a lot of National Trust gardens, and I suppose I'm a little bit biased because I inevitably go to the dog-friendly ones because we have a dog, and often we're on holiday with the dog. You can't leave the dog in holiday accommodation. It's normally specified, and often the weather is such you can't leave her in the car. But we like her to be with us anyway. So I probably by default end up in the less spectacular garden. So I probably should caveat my statement with that. But I think from COVID onwards, certain gardens have suffered from a lack of interest from above sometimes in the garden, for sure. So it's always nice if you go to somewhere and you feel like the gardeners are allowed to really go for it and to lavish love and time and energy and a proper team who know what they're doing. So it lifts the spirits a little bit when you get to see that. And I had to share it with Alan, all these, well, some of the many photos I took on that particular visit. So yeah, cufeas are at the front of my mind. Roses also, looking fabulous at East Ruston at the moment.
Well, there's one particular rose that always surprises me, and the reason is because I bought it as a ground cover rose. It has these massive panicles, I suppose, of little red flowers, and they've got a little bit of white in the throat. I couldn't tell you the name of it. I think it was named after a county of England, and they were sold as this is a dreadful phrase, ground cover roses. Which if you ground cover, how successful is it? I'll leave you to answer the question for that. But however good your ground cover is, you need to weed in between it. Well, can you imagine weeding between a rose? That's going to be prickly old business. Anyway, I grew this rose I took cuttings of it, as I do everything I have, every plant I have if I can. And one of the cuttings I planted up an obelisk, and it's got to a height of about, well, I suppose 8-9 feet. Something like that. And I just tie it in every year and cut out the old spent wood and tie the new stuff in. But it is this lovely fact that it flowers later and later. And it's just about keeping the show going, which is my philosophy anyway. And lots of plants like we are championing at the moment and have been for years, especially Ian, Ruth and myself. We are championing garden chrysanthemums. Now, some years they get completely spoilt by the rain, but other years they don't. So, and isn't it nice to be able to go out into the garden in November, which is the next month coming up in November, and pick yourself some chrysanthemums. The trick is you pick them just before the buds open. When the buds are just showing colour, you pick them and then take them inside. And just in case the weather's so inclement, it does spoil the petals, and the petals are quite fragile. And to this end, I mean, Gilbert, who used to work here in the garden for us years and years ago, he retired, and I give him and his wife, Joan, I send them a season ticket every year. So they come to the garden about 6 or 7 times a year. So they keep abreast of what's happening. And they tell me if I'm doing something wrong as well, which is nice. But Gilbert always brings me a bunch of chrysanthemums that he's dug up from his allotment and put into his, I think his little polythene greenhouse he has up there or something, just to give them a little bit of protection, enough to bring them into flower. And that's our Christmas present from Gilbert. So I know I'm going to have to get a nice little pot full of foliage, and then I just put the chrysanthemums among this evergreen foliage, and it's lovely to have that for Christmas.
Best thing about having an allotment, I think, is being able to have nice big clumps of chrysanthemums. It's not like I've got a huge array, but any chrysanthemums I owned, as soon as I got an allotment, I put them into my little bit that's for flowers. And
Yeah.
especially when you've not been spending a lot of time looking after your allotment, the chrysanthemums are still doing their thing. Actually, I mean, chrysanthemums and dahlias, obviously, bedfellows at my allotment and at lots of allotments. We always talk about dahlias when we talk about what's going on at East
Oh,
Ruston Old
I
Vicarage.
know.
Because there's always something interesting to talk about with your dahlias.
Well, I do. I see. I more and more prefer single flowered dahlias as I get older. I don't know whether it's just because that's what you get when you save seed from a big hybrid bold flowered dahlias. And Jenny, who works here in the greenhouses with me, she said, I haven't got a single double dahlia in my garden since I've been working here, because I just find that the single flowered ones so much better. And of course they are better. They're much better for pollinators and everything else. And I save seed from various dahlias every year. And perhaps to give you an idea how it works, it's completely out of my hands as to what I'm going to get. It's not a specific breeding program. So I save seed of a dahlia that I like, say something like Magenta Star, which is a single vibrant magenta purple dahlia with dark foliage. And there's Dahlia coccinea variety palmeri. I so save seed from that as well. That's a species dahlia. And because of the pollinating insects doing their thing, I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. And out of the 100 seedlings, I might get 5 that I like. The rest, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, they're just dahlia, just a single dahlia. But occasionally you do get something quite spectacular. More importantly than anything else, probably, it's getting one with decent looking foliage, because dahlia foliage, by and large, is rather crass. I've got to go through my dahlias. They're flowering in the greenhouse at the moment. They're starting now to get a bit of mildew, which you expect at this time of the year. But because I've sorted out the ones I want to keep, I've now got to do a full description on a big label, put them in the pot, cut the tops off, and put them to bed for the winter. And what I do is I just lay the pots on their side to let them dry out a little bit. And then you can stack them one on top of the other if you're short of space. But just beware in the spring when they start to grow again, you take them out and give them a bit more space. And then when they start to grow, the ones that you really like, you can take cuttings. When the shoots are about 3 inches long, you wiggle them to and fro, and they'll come off in your hand, and you just pop them in a little bit of compost, and you've got another plant and yet another plant.
The one you sent me a photo of, which I was rather taken with, was a red and white little flower.
Yes, I know the one. Yes.
What was the story behind that one?
Well, the story behind that is it was a dahlia with a French name that I bought from Joe Sharman. And it had, I think the original had sort of an anemone center. So you get these sort of petaloid filaments in the middle that are sort of rather raised. And that gives it the name anemone scented. Why, I don't know really, but there we are. And it's a seed from that, which has turned out to be a bicolored red and white stripe. And I think the red is on the outside of the petal, if I remember correctly. Single flowered dahlia. And I just love it. It's not that wonderful, but it's something else, if you know what I mean.
It is interesting how your taste in dahlias change. When we started doing this podcast, I think I was really the very decorative, maybe not quite dinner plate. I mean, I love to see some fabulous labyrinth dinner plate dahlia in sunset shades in someone else's garden. For me, it's just a bit too much to manage, staking, and then they kind of look out of place in the garden. I don't make the kind of flower like bunches of flowers that can carry off a dinner plate. I do like little tiny modest posies for my little modest house. So I kind of quickly went away from dinner plates, and they've got smaller and smaller. I do love singles, but I think it's collarette, that kind of Collarette dahlias,
Yeah.
I think where my real love is right now. That's my kind of penchant. It wasn't what I wanted to talk about for Flomo at all, but it does bring us around to Flomo, if you like, that fear of missing out you get about a flower or a plant, because the dahlia I really desperately want and have ordered, but it didn't turn up the last time, I did a dahlia order was is it Edith Jones? Lovely pink collarette thing that I really wanted. And I got a mysterious red collarette, which is very, very nice. And I think is called Dillis Ailing. I think it's Dillis Ailing, something like that.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Lovely thing, which I do like
The Ailing
almost.
family were famous breeders of dahlias.
Yeah, I think it's Dillis. Lovely name. It's something that I like almost as much as the one I ordered. So maybe one day I will actually get Edith, whatever she's called, in my life. So that's still a Flomo for me. I've actually come to this podcast, going back to the idea of restraining myself and being sensible, trying to restrict all the actual Flomos I have and just not keep adding to the wish list of plants that I can't possibly look after right now. So, inspired by the National Trust garden I went to, I've tried to focus away from the things that were growing into something I actually could perhaps do, and that is autumn wreaths. Obviously, we all know about the C word wreaths that we're not going to talk about, but I do love that now there seems to be this desire to do spring wreaths and summer, maybe not so much summer wreaths, but autumn wreaths, celebrate the
Yeah.
seasons with a wreath. I live in a place where loads of people do this, and some of them are frankly horrendous because I don't know, £2 from a bargain store, and they're all.
Oh, you just be quiet because you'll get a brick through the window in a minute.
I love that people are going for it and decorating their houses. Obviously, some of them will be Halloween themed, in which I'm not a huge Halloween person anyway, but the ones which are lots of really awful fake flowers and fake gourds that don't even try to look real, I can't abide. But one or two people have got, I don't even think they're real, but they're quite tastefully done sort of fake things that I think they throw up in the loft and bring out in autumn, but they're quite nice. I would love to do a proper, genuine, real autumn wreath. I'll probably never get the time, but that is something I'm kind of flowing over. Lots of autumn foliage and berries and gourds and all the things of the season in some big
Lots of
fabulous.
grasses too.
Yes, yeah, all those seed heads. Oh,
Seed
just
heads.
really
Yeah,
capture the
yeah.
season in a wreath, which is kind of what they've done at this garden. They had huge gates on the walled garden and big wreaths that I'll try and add a photo to the video version. And I thought, oh yeah, that's something I'm Flomoing over. So that's what I'm bringing to the Flomo party, something that isn't really attainable for me, but more attainable than keeping a plant alive right now. Alan, what would you like to add?
Well, when I went to this nursery yesterday, there were several things I saw that I couldn't buy, and some things that I could buy. But I mean, I'll just run through one or two of them with you. There is a wonderful hanging cactus. It looked like an epiphyllum, but I don't think it was. I think it was a relative. And it was covered in these wonderful cream open, oh, lovely shaggy flowers. I just thought it was to die for, but they didn't have any for sale. Now, I think that's a rotten tease when you go to a nursery and there's this plant full of cutting material. And, they could, even if they charged, I don't know, a couple of bob for them or something, just to have a few for sale for people would be lovely. Then there's a great fashion in house plants at the moment, especially variegated Swiss cheese plants.
Yes.
And I looked at this Swiss cheese plant, and it was probably 5 feet tall in a pot. And I looked at it and I thought, well, is it real? So I went up and I sort of had to feel the leaf because, it was beautifully dressed and it looked just too perfect. I think it had been treated with something called leaf shine, which is a spray you can buy to make your houseplants look shinier than they really are. And anyway, it was real. And I sort of looked and there was a label and there was a price. And I looked at it and I said, Graham, have you got any change on you? And he said, why? I said, well, I'd like to buy that Swiss cheese plant. He said, how much is it? I said, £699. Needless to say, I didn't get it. But I have just the spot for it.
Oh.
So,
Well, if you
I mean,
steal to
I don't know
Scratch to
how
where
old
my
he was.
mother lives and break in, I've my £35 one from Steve Edney is growing so well there. As I've said before, I don't dare bring it here, and particularly not now. So it's actually it's not quite at the £700 stage, but it's turning into a nice.
It's a variegated
It
one.
is, yes.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you a story. Sonia, who you know who I mean, she gave me a cutting of her variegated Swiss cheese plant, and it has one leaf and a bud. And this is 3 years ago, and it still has one leaf and a bud. And somebody came to the garden the other day, and I took them into the greenhouse, and I said, have a look at this. And he said, well, for a start, it's planted upside down. What do I know about Swiss cheese plants? Monstera deliciosa, eat your heart out. Don't come and live in my house. I'll plant you upside down. But he said quite often you do get these leaf cuttings, which are, well, I mean, they cut above and below a leaf, and they air root it wrapped in moss and things like that. And then you put it into a pot and you look at it and you gaze at it reproachfully, and it gazes back equally reproachfully at you until you harden your heart one day and said, out, go out. I might put it in the garden next summer and just see if it grows and see what happens.
Planted the other way up. Might be one of my favourite stories we've ever covered on Talking Dirty. That made us all feel better about our various gardening mishaps.
It's like when Graham bought an old car once, for restoration, because that's what he likes to do. He took it to somebody to look at, and they said, well, for a start, that bumper's on upside down. It just reminded me of that.
Oh, well, one day when mine gets big enough, we'll have to take a cutting and you can plant it the right way up. We'll do one straight and one angled, so we definitely know which is the top.
Exactly.
Well, one day, there we go. There's a plant. If you've got a variegated Swiss cheese plant, there's one thing that Alan hasn't really, not properly got, at least not the right way up. So
I'd love to have one. I'd love to have one. And I promise if anybody gives me one, I will treat it with kindness.
Well, who knows what might turn up in the post after that comment.
He is just around the corner.
Thank you so much for keeping us company over this October special, and we will at least be back for a November one, if nothing else. We're endeavouring to turn out as many of these as we can in my current situation, but we'll just do our best. That's all we can offer.
Well, that's nice. It's nice to actually talk about optimistic things in this sad old world, which is full of trouble and strife and everything else.
It certainly is. It's always nice to talk about plants. They make us all feel better, at least here amidst our own people who all get it. Until next time, happy gardening, everybody.
Happy gardening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello. I love these brilliant leaves. Your little co-star. My light, I normally try and make myself look better with a light which is just broken. As I was getting this ready earlier while he was asleep, I just, every time I turn it on, obviously the connection is broken, so it just keeps turning off again, so I'll have to give up on that. I've been to baby swimming today and I look like it, so it's like a disaster over here. Never mind. Terrible hair, no light, and a small child getting ready in the kitchen, but other than that we're all fine. Oh,
don't mention the C word.
I was just thinking it. Literally, when I came downstairs this morning, I said, oh, it's not going to be long, Theo, until there's a tree in that corner. Oh, I do love the festive season, but we won't talk about it now. We'll talk about it in the future. Oh, the name is right on the tip of my tongue. I'm never going to... Oh, Dillis Ailing.
I'm reaching for the stars. Thank God I haven't got any holes in this jumper. Oh, goodness me, you've caught me on the hop.